Hey everyone, welcome to the Super Region 1 Playoff Podcast on this Thanksgiving Eve Wednesday night. Along with Kerry Moyer and D2 KFerg Chris Ferguson, I'm Chuck Bittner, here to recap round one in the Super Region 1 Playoff bracket from this past weekend and get you set for the two games that we will have coming up this weekend at Kutztown and at California. So, guys, we certainly had the most interesting slate of results around the nation when you look at the playoff brackets. And the reason I say that becomes pretty obvious when we bring up the current state of the bracket and we look at where the seeded teams were last week and where they are this week. So we only had one of the seeded teams, which also means one of the home teams, that advanced into the second round. Very strange set of circumstances to have this happen. Chris, I know you've been around this a long time. I've been trying to think of any recent rounds where I could think where we had this many unseeded teams advance. And I know last year we had several, but to have this many in one bracket, really kind of unusual to see.
Yeah, I agree with that. I can't think of any because, yeah, just what we saw. I thought that things were going to be a little bit more um, unfavorable, especially when you look at assumption, and that turned out to not be the case. And then, all of these games were really tight, except for the obvious one. They all really tight within two scores. So it was great football, but definitely not expected to see this many unseeded move on.
Yeah, it really is interesting. And we actually do have two games this weekend that pair unseeded teams in the second round. We have one in the Super Region 4 bracket as well. And we actually didn't know until, it was really not until Monday morning, where the California and Frostburg game was going to be played. We were kind of hearing unofficially it's going to be at Cal, but we didn't get the final confirmation of that until Monday morning. So interesting set of circumstances there. Thankfully for those two teams, it's not a long road trip either way. They're actually not too far apart. And we'll actually go into that matchup here a little bit. Then that is a rematch from the regular season, as is Assumption at Kutztown. So, Cary, really kind of interesting how this comes down to a couple of rematches. And we talked about that last week. But this is not the set of rematches we thought we were going to get.
No, no, it wasn't. And yeah, nice thing, of course, I was up at Kutztown last Saturday and having that 12 o'clock kickoff. I actually went out and I was in my car, and you guys know I'm posting ferociously of hear the score updates of the other games with the 1 o'clock games, and so yeah, we kind of foreshadowed a little bit. We'd have some rematches, but Chuck, definitely not what we were expecting. But again, I think both of the teams that played their backsides off against CIAA opponents. Are kind of clamoring, hey, put some respect on our name. And, we won the game and we're moving on to round two.
No doubt. No doubt. And, for Assumption, I think that was probably the one that I think I was really the only one that surprised me a little bit. I think there was a lot of unknowns just in how Frostburg and Johnson C. Smith might match up because we don't see a lot of intersection in those conferences. I certainly felt that Cal had a very good puncher's chance going to Virginia Union. I expected that to be a close game. I really did not think Assumption with a backup quarterback was going to go to IUP and win. We'll unpack that here in just a little bit, but I think that was the one, probably the result that surprised me the most heading into round number two. So let's actually dive into each one of these games just a little bit and talk about them. So we'll kind of go from the seeded order down, and we'll start with the one that really didn't have any drama, probably one of the few games of the day that really was never really in doubt. I guess, Cary, it started a tiny bit sluggishly for Kutztown, but once they got going, they ended this one pretty quickly.
They did. And, kind of circling back to something that we talked about last week, Chuck, and I think you brought it up and asked me a comment on is, the end of the season, and having that game with a very feisty Bloomsburg team, and then, of course, slugging it out, in the PSAC championship game. KU did have some adversity here of having two turnovers in the first half, including a fumble on the opening kickoff. So, when I caught up with Coach Clements after the game, again, just talking some ball, talking about the PSAC championship game. But, remember what you had asked last week, we kind of talked about that. But again, it makes total sense of maybe there are some things they're not accustomed to, but, he talked about that. That's a regular practice thing for them, sudden change. They'll be doing something in practice and boom, sudden change. And, I think what we saw with the Kutztown defense was what we would expect out of them, doing a great job, in the red zone, having that fumble on the kickoff, turning it right around and, having another fumble on offense in the first half and no damage done. And then it was just, taking it from there. I think, for me too, the thing that was, it was such a balanced attack. And, there were some guys that, haven't gotten a lot of touches necessarily, earlier in the season that did some great things. Priscilla, the wide receiver, I mentioned a whole bunch of guys, last week in the show after the PSAC All East team was announced, but he had a great job. I saw him walking out after the game, said, you got a lot of yards. So I think, he ended up with about 95 of receiving touchdown there. Talked about Burkhart, just being a bruiser, but having speed and catching balls out of the backfield. He had a receiving touchdown, Craig Miller, guy getting, two rushing touchdowns there. But again, this isn't something that shows up in the stats, not necessarily tangible, but, I've seen, KU a lot over the years. And I just think Judd Novak I think it was just, again, no interceptions, he had a lot of yards, but it was just a great quarterback football game out of him. Again, I don't have tangibles on that. Just like, it was so great to see. And, that's the thing of having that balanced attack, with being able to throw the ball. I thought he threw the ball, great. Probably, again, he's had a lot of great games, but it just seemed like he is really hitting his stride. And, again, the defense, lights out. And, it was, just pretty much KU doing KU things. And, we always talk about maybe a score, maybe 10 points. 40 some, they kind of outdid that a little bit. Of course, they pitched some other shutouts throughout this year, but, putting up 52, there was a scoop and score in there. And I know, Chris and I, he was commenting on some of the things, Lee Coleman, an INT, a scoop and score. Dude can stick too. He cut a guy in half, coming up, and lighting a guy up. So, I mean, that was just a great game for him. Freddie Redder, again, one of our Elite 100 guys, kind of banged up in the beginning of the year. This is when they needed him to be healthy. Had 2 sacks. They had 5 sacks against, Bentley after 6, the week before in the championship game. So, again, they're tough, expecting big things, coming forward.
Well, I think one of the things that kind of like for them as we got deeper into this game, a couple of things that stand out. One, they were able to kind of get a few guys out of the game fairly early. The fact that you're going to have to win 5 games in this tournament to be national champion, and we know that they're all going to be tough games against really good teams. To have an opportunity to get some extra guys out there, get them some live reps, and get some of your top players out of the game. I mean, Stephen Burkhart only had to carry the ball 6 times in this game. They were able to kind of lean on some other guys to really kind of carry the load. I think that really benefits them, knowing what lies ahead for them to get where they want to go. So, Chris, I know that you kind of like to get down in the minutia on some things like, red zone offense, red zone defense. I threw a couple stats in there because they really kind of stood out to me. 3rd down defense and 4th down defense for Kutztown. Obviously at a certain point, Bentley's just got to start going for it. So yeah, 8 attempts on 4th down is a little unusual, but when your defense can get off the field the way they do, that is a pretty strong recipe for success.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at Bentley, and I think the one thing that stands out for me is, 52 pass attempts overall. That's hard, especially when you got the defense that Kutztown has and trying to, put pressure on the quarterback and you're playing from behind, the entire game. So at some point you're just like, you throw the running game out because you're not getting anything out of it. You just go full air raid. I mean, that's a really tough place to be in for most any teams. But that's a very uncomfortable place for Bentley to be. So that was the other stat line that really stood out for me.
Yeah, no doubt. Only 15, I think, 15 net rushing yards for the day for the Falcons. So obviously part of that's just trying to run into the teeth of that defense, and then also having to go almost exclusively to the aerial attack to try to make up some ground. So Kutztown leaves, no doubt. They advance into the second round, and we'll talk about their matchup with Assumption here a little bit later on down the road. But let's go to our next game. First playoff game for both of these teams in Division II. First home game in the playoffs, of course, goes to Johnson C. Smith. 21-7 final. But Chris, this was a pretty close one most of the way. Obviously very low scoring. You were at this one and got to see it up close. Give us some of your talking points on how this one played out.
Well, kudos to Frostburg because they seem to have a bit of a game plan that was to, also use their defensive line to give JCSU some fits. John C. Smith, a team like that is still trying to build from 1 year to the next. This is like the best outcome they've ever had, and they still trying to build a little thing called depth, and I think they just sort of ran out of gas, especially on the offensive line, because you just saw in that first couple quarters that Kelvin Durham was just under duress for a lot of that time, to the point where, I think he was trying to run where he could, but he was more like running sideways instead of north south. Frostburg, they were very efficient in the first half, mixing up the pass and the run, and that was after the first offensive series for both teams because they both threw interceptions. But yeah, you get to 14-0. You can sort of pin your ears back a little bit, and JCSU just quite frankly they were flat in the first half. Second half, third quarter comes, and JCSU is moving with a lot more urgency. And they were able to get on the board with DeAndre Proctor in particular, and also just Bobby Smith. I think he was a little hampered in the first half, so they went to Antonio Krim, and Krim had some success on the ground in that third quarter for JCSU. In a 14-7 ball game, when you're trying to make up ground. In the way that JCSU can do it, they had a pretty big pass play, and then they were like on the 25 of Frostburg, and then Durham fumbles the ball away, and you just kind of felt like the entire all the momentum was gone, but just all the air just kind of came out of the stadium for JCSU at that point, and it just after that it was just such a struggle that. Frostburg could just milk the clock away, and that last 7 came in the fourth quarter to kind of extend the lead, but with KJ Smothers. So yeah, it was pretty tough if you're a Golden Bulls fan because there was a lot of promise coming into this game. It wasn't definitely not any disrespect to Frostburg. It's just that JCSU did not have a good game. And they chose to have a not a great game at the worst possible time, and Frostburg definitely took advantage of that in a lot of ways. So 21-7.
So, Chris, do you think that there's an element to this where obviously they'd had such a great week the week before against Virginia Union, won that one by a pretty wide margin, but we did kind of understand that they were pretty banged up. They had a lot of injuries and had some depth issues. Does this kind of just feel like maybe a moment where they had put so much into winning that CIAA championship and just didn't quite have enough left to come right back and play a quality Frostburg State team the next week?
Well, head coach Maurice Flowers would disagree with that, although I think that there was a lot of unfinished business for JCSU after last year, and the way that they crashed out of not just the playoffs, but they also crashed out of even making an appearance in the championship game. That there was a lot of focus on that, and it's like, wow, we actually achieved what we wanted to achieve. They left those points that they needed for this year. They left that in the CIAA championship game, the way they were just scoring in bunches. And now you go to playoffs and you're like, okay, all right. Yeah, it's just one of those things where Frostburg, it just feels like they went through their lumps as well, and they are starting to possibly peak some. And JCSU was quite hampered. I mean, Krim is like their fourth string running back, and Bobby Smith was their third string. And for example, so I think that just stuff just started piling up for the Golden Bulls.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned Coach Flowers. We actually have a little bit of audio. Let's hear some of his kind of opening remarks and talking about the game from the press conference at the end of last week's contest.
First off, I want to say thank you to my team. Say thank you to my team, my coaching staff, for an unforgettable year, record-setting year, history-making year. Just thank you to my team. And the team is included the training staff for patching us together to get through this point. But just so happy for our university. Definitely didn't end the way we wanted to, but so happy for our young men. Disappointed that we didn't win, of course, but in no way is this a disappointing time around JCSU. But so proud to be the head coach here. So proud of our young men. It's a tough one. It's a tough one. But again, it's not going to damper the gains that we have made in the program. As we said, for our young men, we don't lose, we learn. This is a lesson. You won't see it, it'll hurt right now, but this is something that's going to fuel us to be even better. I'll open it up.
So you talk about it's not a loss, it's a lesson. So what are the immediate lessons?
Right now, it's love up my guys and make sure they understand that it's supposed to hurt, but to look back on what we've done. We haven't had time to reflect on it, but the lessons that we know we're going to learn, that's easy to see, is we had 3 turnovers, I believe, if not 4. We know that's one of our things to the formula for success. 3 turnovers, you can't win. And then we had mental errors. We just did some things where we just normally don't do with mental errors. And then we just did not do our job on a consistent basis. It went back to, I call it the take turns syndrome, where it was this guy's it's his turn to mess up, then it's the next guy. But it comes down to moments. And we call it moment plays. Early in the game, I think we had several 3rd and shorts, and we didn't convert on any of them. That's something that we normally do. We're a good 3rd down conversion team, one of the better ones in the country, and we didn't. And what we do in our program, we never offer excuses in our program. We never do.
I think it's well said. He obviously he gets into talking about the actual game and things that happened, but I think the important thing there was that opening remarks about being really proud of what they accomplished this year, because it was probably the best season of JCSU football in all of our lifetimes. So a whole lot to be proud of there, and they accomplished a lot. And Chris, I think this is only year 3 for Coach Flowers, 3 or 4, and the trajectory that they have been on. You gotta like the future there for the Golden Bulls.
Yeah, I mean, I have a general rule when it comes to the playoffs, and that's like, a HBCU team that gets in for the first year in a long time, it's a learning experience for them. They typically don't win those games, and next year they learn from that, and that's when you start to see the success. I think you've seen that. Winston State was a bit of an exception to that, but Bowie State was like that. Virginia Union was like that. So yeah, it's typically, I think Virginia State was the exception when they played post way back when, like 2014 or something like that. So yeah, I just think that in the case like this, they're definitely going to learn from it, and they know what it takes to now compete. Because he's right, like those third downs, 3rd and short. I mean, normally you just give it to Bobby Smith, and he's a battering ram, and he can pick up a couple yards in those situations. Even, when the box is crowded, they just couldn't get it done. And you just knew at that point in time that they were going to be in for a real challenge. I mean, that Frostburg State defensive line is very good. It's very stout. and they showed it.
Yeah, they made it really hard on them. It's yeah, JCSU can look at things that they didn't do as well, but also the big part of the challenge was they were playing a really good and very inspired Frostburg State team that really brought a good challenge to them. So, yeah, obviously from the Frostburg State side, a huge moment for them as well. First D2 playoff game, first D2 playoff win on the road against a conference champion team coming off, an incredible, huge moment for them. So big win there for Frostburg State, 10-win season for them. And they keep going. So they're going to play at California this weekend. So speaking of California, the Vulcans went on the road and got a hard-fought win at Virginia Union. And maybe this is another one, Chris, where the home team just didn't really have their best stuff. I mean, Curtis Allen got his yards, but they really had trouble throwing the ball, had a couple of turnovers. Just overall, just kind of a tough day for the home team.
A couple? Oh gosh, it was more than a couple. Oh man, yeah. VUU, they turned the ball over in some really bad spots, and with Cal, the numbers by themselves are not especially flashy, but the one thing that they have been able to do this season is take advantage of turnovers and have that shortened field. And when you turn over the ball in the red zone or really close to that, which is what VU did, man, it just really set up Cal really, really nicely. And so that's a lot of the story. I mean, VU, to their credit, they battled back from double-digit deficits to try to get something done. But yeah, I mean, you can. There's a game plan to beat VUU, and JCSU shared that in the championship game, which is, you commit to stop the running game, and you force that quarterback to beat you, and see what happens. And RJ Rosales, before he got knocked out of the game, that's exactly what happened. He just struggled big time in this one. So yeah, the other thing, Cal, with what they wanted to do, they kept VU's offense off the field. There was definitely a double-digit difference in time of possession in this one. So big credit to them as well for what they were able to do.
And Cary, for Cal, I think it really helped them that they were very well prepared for this moment because they've been in a lot of these types of games against quality teams all season long. Some of those didn't go their way, but some of them did. It felt like maybe that was a big factor in this, just the kind of the level of preparation they had to be in this type of game.
Yeah, definitely. And, we talked about a little bit last week with Cal. Of course, they had their time, in the Super Region 1 playoffs last year. A couple guys banged up through there, but, kind of following up on what Chris said too, with the defense and, causing, those turnovers, 2 touchdowns off those turnovers. And throughout this year, I think Cal's defense has done some of those things. Defense, special teams. I mean, they're averaging 30 points plus a game, but they've got 8 touchdowns that are non-touchdowns from the offense. So again, it's creating those opportunities. And again, Curtis Allen, I think we all know, household name, kind of reflect back to, Jada Byers a few years ago. And, they, kind of with Virginia Union running into, a similar situation up at Kutztown a couple of years ago. But I think it was maybe 8 carries in the second half and 10 yards. So again, it's over time, Cal's defense really stepped up and kept a guy who's used to getting over 200 yards a game in check, specifically in the second half.
Yeah, so really great win for Cal, and it kind of makes you wonder if they're going to sort of be that team this year in this bracket that, gets in and we kind of think, well, maybe they don't quite have the record to be there. Certainly, I know people in other regions looking at some other teams that were 2 and 3 loss teams that they thought should be in this tournament. California might be that team that maybe comes in closer to the back end of the unseeded teams that all of a sudden makes playoff runs. So we'll see. And they actually get to go back home. So they're going to be playing at home against Frostburg State. So that was probably one of the more interesting and very competitive games this weekend. Of course, it did come down to the very end. Virginia Union, despite the struggles that they had, they had a chance for a long field goal that could have tied it at the very end. So even with all the adversity that they faced and not having their best stuff, to still really have a shot at the very end, they were in it. They were in it. So we'll go to then our final game, which was Assumption playing at the number 4 seed IUP. And of course, IUP was coming off that loss in the PSAC championship game. And, Cary, we kind of talked about it last week, how, the outcome of this game and the way it plays out might really have to do with just how well does IUP put the PSAC championship game behind them and move on to the next week. Because, and I thought IUP performed really well in the PSAC championship game. I did. It just didn't go their way. But that can be a pretty deflating loss. And then coming into this, you felt like Assumption's definitely got a puncher's chance in this, but I also felt like if IUP can get the passing game going, that's going to be a little bit difficult for Assumption to keep up with. And I really did not think that they would be able to muster enough offense with a backup quarterback to win at IUP. Well, it turned out that they were able to do exactly that. They got a pretty good performance out of their backup quarterback, Dom Santiago. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes. Really worked he passed the ball pretty well, but they also used the quarterback run game really effectively with him. And they picked their spots with that. And there were a few times where they really made chunk plays with him running the ball. On the other side of it, I thought IUP did a fantastic job working the ball around with Devin Whitlock. You can see his stat line there, 13 receptions for 152 yards. I don't think he caught a single ball that was more than 4 yards past the line of scrimmage. Every one of his receptions was underneath, and then he was just making stuff happen with his legs, and they did a really good job in their blocking schemes. But Assumption was very committed to not letting Maurice Massey and their other receivers beat them over the top. They were very, very committed to that. And yes, Whitlock got his yards, but that kind of ended up being most of IUP's offense. And it just wasn't enough for them to sustain and finish drives against a pretty tough Assumption defense. Those are some of the things that stood out to me. What are some of the things that you saw in watching this one?
So, yeah, I could go off on a lot of tangents here, and I think you made a lot of good points, Chuck. So, again, we think about that first drive in the PSAC championship game, a lot of the short stuff underneath, the slip screens, the yards after the catch that IUP had. And again, we all knew about Massey coming in, and what Whitlock did this year was just incredible as well. Yeah, and I think I saw it in some of Chris's mentions as well. And of course, Coach Castillo, a lot of ties back to the PSAC, the D coordinator there, caught up with him a little bit. And really, this is a tale of two halves. I mean, when you look at 20-10 at halftime, but when you look at the adjustments that were made by Assumption, and also Coach put out there too, of these guys are well conditioned, and if it gets to fourth quarter, they're going to slug it out in the fourth quarter, and they did. I mean, of course, they put up 13 points of their own in the third, but it basically shut out IUP the second half, and so the adjustments made, the attitude of that team, we're fighting this out to the end. Really, it really shook out well for them. They made it happen, and probably yes, one of the bigger surprises we saw. Out of Super Region 1, but a lot of the games, for them to advance. So you got to give it to them. And like you said, hey, Dom Santiago, did a little bit of the passing game, but the two touchdowns rushing. But again, I think it really comes down to that defense in the fourth quarter where they held IUP to 59 total yards when they had to, try and come back, and they had 2 sacks in the fourth quarter. So, defense rose the occasion and they showed up.
Yeah. And, I didn't mention earlier on, but, IUP had a 20-7 lead late in the first half of this game. And I mean, no lead is safe in the first half, but that felt like this is going the way IUP needs it to go to win this game. Assumption got a field goal right at the end of the half to make it 20-10. And that, even at the time, that felt like a very big scoring opportunity for them to get that 3 points. And then to shut them out in the second half, that the way Assumption's defense kind of adjusted to what IUP was doing, which again was a lot with Whitlock. And they still got their yards with that, but Assumption made sure that that wasn't going to be what beats them. And they also made sure that getting the ball over the top to Massey wasn't going to beat them. So to pitch a second half shutout and then get 2 scores of their own to win this game, I thought it was really impressive. I'll admit I didn't give them a great chance to win this game. In the playoffs, everybody's good, so we know that anything can happen. But I really did think that IUP was going to be the better team and win this game. So I mean, kudos to Assumption. They really earned it. Overcame adversity, really fought through a lot, and they beat a quality football team at their house to get a playoff win. So congrats to them. And, Chris, the Northeast 10 hasn't had a lot of great moments in the playoffs recently. This is a really big win for that conference.
Yeah, and then you also have to think about like the defections that they've had too. I mean, between that and New Haven was the team that was kind of always at the top, along with Assumption, and then they left and went to Division One, and you kind of wonder going into the season, like who's going to step up? Even Bentley, like they lost their head coach to Division One and had to start over, and they started like 0-3, if I remember correctly.
That's right.
And so for them to get where they were was pretty monumental. But yeah, I think with the Northeast 10, we haven't spent a lot of time talking about them on the Sunday show because you just didn't really know kind of how that was going to pan out and who was going to seize control of that conference. Assumption having already played Kutztown and it wasn't even close. You just kind of wondered. They're sort of backing into the playoffs a little bit after that loss to Bentley. But in the end, yeah, they came in with a really great game plan to take this game. I just want to point out, like, what a 98-yard drive.
Yes.
For Assumption. I mean, that's a killer. I mean, and then they came back on the field the next time they got the ball, and they had the opportunity to actually put this out to 2 scores. And they just weren't able to get it done. But I think that just shows you, like again, that momentum that Assumption had, like it was so monumental. And then they relied on that defense to close out the game. I mean, that's just incredible for a team that definitely was under the radar.
Yeah, that was a great point. 98-yard touchdown drive. That was actually the final points of the day late in the third quarter. And you're right. Assumption actually had a chance. They were on the doorstep to extend that lead. And actually a little bit of a bizarre set of circumstances. They ended up with a 4th and goal at the 1. And they had a kind of a botched play. And Dom Santiago, the quarterback, got hit by the running back on the side of his head. And it knocked him down. And he did not come back into the game. So we don't know what his status is for this weekend. Hopefully that was just precautionary that he didn't come back in if they were concerned about a head or neck injury. Hopefully that was just precautionary, but he didn't return to the game. So hopefully that was all just precautionary. But yeah, kind of a bizarre thing, and that was a 4th down play. But to your point, they actually had an opportunity to even grow that lead late in the game. So. But yeah, so overall, happy for the Northeast 10 because to your point, Chris, we kind of wondered who's going to take up the mantle and sort of be the team because New Haven had reclassified. And we assumed that's probably going to be Assumption and Bentley. But yeah, both of them lost their opening games and, they weren't really close. And we kind of put the Northeast 10 out of sight, out of mind for almost the entire season, really until that Assumption Bentley game late on. So this is a great win and hopefully something that gets Assumption into the final top 25 at the end of the season. And they're not done yet. So let's see what comes up this weekend for them. So that is the recap of the first round in the Super Region 1 part of the bracket. So we'll take a look at what's coming up this weekend. So once again, there's a recap on the overall bracket. So we have Assumption going to Kutztown and Frostburg going to California in our matchup of the unseeded teams. Let's take a look at Assumption and Kutztown. So there's your stat compare, but actually, since this is a rematch, I think it's even more interesting to take a second to revisit the first matchup. So all the way back in week 1, Cary, I know you have fond memories of this night. Probably still feels like you just left. So I know that was a long time ago, but you just give us some reflections on what you remember from that game and the matchup and how that played out.
Yeah, so I was able to cross the the game that last 2 days off the bucket list. This one was the opener up at KU, and it started on Thursday night, and several weather delays later, it ended on Friday morning. So I think one of the things is you know how a team performs in the first half, and then how do they come out and play the second half? Well, it was like coming out from including halftime, which, if I remember correctly, the legitimate halftime, there was one play after halftime, I believe Kutztown scored, and then we went into another weather delay. But it was seeing what a team would do coming out after halftime like 4 times. And, that early in the season, Kutztown was already solid, already clicking on all cylinders and coming out. Not fair to gauge exactly where Assumption was at. Again, what you see in the first couple games, specifically that first game of the season. But I think it was more the impression was Kutztown, and we really saw them kind of do that week in, week out up until the end, had a battle with Bloom, and then, the PSAC championship game. But, they were that consistent in the beginning. And again, with that, a lot happened throughout the course. Again, I talked about last week, Chuck, you and I talked about Novak, and coming into the season, may not to be the biggest stat guy, but he's been consistent throughout, and we saw that in week 1. So I don't want to steal all the thunder of things coming up here and foreshadow too much, but just that's probably the biggest reflection. And that was a pure football game. There's nobody there. It's a Thursday night. The band's not there. I mean, other than your mom and dad and family that love you. It was like, a PA announcer, and we were just playing football, and the loved ones in the stands. So very different than we see on those nice sunny Saturday afternoons, in late October or the beginning of November. So those are my fond memories there, Chuck. Thanks for letting me reminisce.
Well, we wanted all your talking points because we're going to pick the game here in just a minute. So we wanted all your intel and all your talking points. But I'll give you kudos. I'll be honest with you, Cary. I don't know if I would have stuck out all of those weather delays. I might have packed it in at some point by the time they got deeper into the second half. I was standing in the rain at the game I was at that night as well, but thankfully did not have to endure the weather delays. But, to your point about, Kutztown kind of just being in mid-season form right from opening night, I think the thing that really stood out when I went back and kind of went through the recap and the box scores, just the balance that they have overall, offense to defense, rushing to passing. 249 rushing yards, 233 passing yards. That just seems so typical for them, for what they are, what they can do. That actually is true balance, an even split. That's not necessarily what coaches consider balance. Balance is when we need to run the ball, we can run the ball. We need to throw the ball, we can throw the ball. That's obviously them. The one thing I would point out, Jaden Stewart was kind of the bell cow that night. He hasn't played for a couple weeks, so he got injured, I think probably about mid-season, and then he got re-injured in the Bloom game late in the season, hasn't played. So, and I don't know what his status is, if he's going to be back at any point in the playoffs or not, but it's really been Burkhart for the last couple of weeks as the primary ball carrier. So with that, we'll go on and actually make our pick. So we'll bring up the stat compare one more time. So Chris, I'll go to you first. Just some overall thoughts on what you'll be looking for here, and what's your pick for this one?
Well, probably one of the biggest questions is the status of both Assumption quarterbacks at this point. Are you going down to a third option, which is a awfully tough spot to put a quarterback who is third on the depth chart against a defense like Kutztown. So that's one big piece of that. I think the other thing is, what did Assumption learn to go up against a Kutztown second time in the season? Because it wasn't close first game. And so That's a big one to me, because if you're trying to pass the ball like they seem to like to do, I mean, 16 pass completions for some pretty large yards. That means that you got some time to either get the ball down the field, or you have the quick passing game, and your receivers can and get some yards at the catch. Either way, protecting that quarterback is going to be really important for the offensive line for Assumption. And then on the other side, shoot, I mean, the defense is they're going to have to step up, against a very seasoned quarterback in Judd Novak. So, yeah, we've seen them do it against IUP, but the difference between IUP and Kutztown is Kutztown can run the ball. So, I mean, to me, I don't. Maybe the score is a little closer depending on how Assumption's offense sort of shakes out this week before the game. But to me, Kutztown is just on a different level than pretty much most of SR1 right now, and I'm taking them.
Yeah, so Cary, I'll go to you last. I'm going to go with Kutztown here as well. Some of the similar talking points, and I think there's just a tremendous amount of pressure on the Assumption defense heading into this game, with or without one of their one or two quarterbacks. Even if Castington comes back, who's an elite player, or if they don't have him, if they have Dom Santiago, regardless, they need a Herculean effort from their defense. As good or even better than they did last week, because Kutztown's actually quite a bit more dynamic than IUP is, for the exact reason you just mentioned, is that Kutztown has a running game. So there's a lot of pressure on the Assumption defense heading into this. I think what I like about it here in this spot versus week one is obviously Assumption knows a lot more about who they are and what they do well. And of course, these teams have a lot of history with each other. They have played for like 10 years in a row. So it's almost like a conference game now when these two get together. And Assumption has had their success against Kutztown. This is not a one-sided rivalry, not by any means. In fact, I think in the last 10 years, I think it's 5-5. So that doesn't mean anything on Saturday. And I think Kutztown's just a much better team right now. But it's not like Assumption is completely outclassed by Kutztown as a program. They can compete with them. But yeah, there's a lot of pressure on their defense, and the variable at quarterback is obviously, from a pick perspective, just looking at this game competitively, they will really need to have either Jay Castington or Dom Santiago for this to be a game that they could really compete in and have a chance to win. So all that added up, Cary, I go with the Golden Bears here. But what are some of the things that you think Assumption's going to need to do in order to give themselves a good chance here?
Just kind of piggybacking on some of that. So again, it always starts all up front. For the Assumption defense, it is a tall task. And revisiting some of the things we talked about real quick last week. Kutztown's offensive line, two of our Elite 100 watch list players with left guard, left tackle, Elliott and Chernecki on that offensive line. Their 5 starting offensive linemen were all either PSAC first or second team. That's 2 years in a row with it. Again, Jaden Stewart had the big game in the first game. Burkhart talked about him a lot, his ability to be a bruiser. He's got speed, he's got finesse, can catch a ball. Ben Martin III and Craig Miller running the ball last week. I think there are a lot of teams that would like to have those guys run the ball for them. They're so deep. Luke Maxwell, the tight end, great tight end, but they put him in the backfield to bang it on short yardage too. Crisilla, what he's really done now with the passing game, and just Novak just being a field general and what he does out there. They can beat you how they need to beat you. And I think that the touch and some of Novak's deep balls that I saw last week, again, I think he's just playing at an all-time high. So you got an incredible offensive line. You've got an offense that can spread the ball around. It's not just relying on one guy. It's a tough challenge for anybody. But again, I appreciate Assumption and what they did in shutting down IUP in the second half last week. So they're not going to go in and just hand this over. And on the flip side, Kutztown's defense, that's a tough go, for any QB1, let alone if you have a Harlon Hill type of guy there. But if you're, looking at some of your 2s and 3s that really need to step up, it's a tough tale. But again, those blue turf guys, New Haven. I mean, I think if you ever said, Northeast 10, that's where my mind would have always gravitated to. I saw them, against Shepherd down at Shepherd, when Bajent was there. And but now it's really, again, because of having that familiarity, seeing Assumption week 1 really kind of was all the way through. So it was a bit of a surprise with the 18 format now, with Bentley being able to get into the mix with it. But, again, it's you still got to go out and play the game. But again, nothing against Assumption, but, as long as we're doing this, I don't see anybody that's going to be able to dent Kutztown in Super Region 1. So I'm going with the Golden Bears.
All right. So it's a clean sweep. We all go with the Golden Bears, but I'm pretty sure we all picked IUP last week as well. So, and we know Assumption will come in with a ton of confidence. So we'll be interested to see how this one plays out on Saturday. So let's go to our next matchup, which conveniently another rematch from earlier this season. And actually that rematch not as long ago, because this was kind of an odd late season out of conference game, that opening in the schedule that California had because of Mercyhurst leaving the conference last year. And I think Frostburg State had one because of Notre Dame leaving the year before as well. So at the time, California won this game to go to 6-3. Frostburg State fell to 7-2, and somehow I have the score backwards on that. So I have no idea how I managed to do that. Totally on me. So we'll just move on from that really quickly. This actually was a California victory. So sorry guys, I flubbed up. Trying to do too many things at this point in the year. California obviously did win that matchup. But a couple of things that really stood out. I'll just get that off the screen so I'll stop embarrassing myself. A couple of things that really stood out in that game, though, and I don't know if there's a ton that we take away from it that we really apply towards the matchup that's coming up, because Frostburg State was playing the third-string quarterback in that game. Their starter going back from last year had been injured early in the season. So they've been going with Jordan Brooks most of the season, and he's played very, very well. He didn't play in this game against California. So they had to go to a third option, Tanner Pfeiffer, and he played all right. They, in this type of environment, he played all right. A couple turnovers, but they got a decent performance out of him. But nonetheless, he's their third option. So that's a big variable in the way this game played out. And the other thing was there were 4 non-offensive touchdowns. So really just kind of strange. Frostburg State had 2 special teams touchdowns in this. So I don't know, guys. There's a lot of ways you could spin that, a lot of ways you could look at it. You could say, well, if Frostburg's quarterback plays, maybe this is a completely different ball game. On the other hand, if California doesn't have a couple breakdowns on special teams, this isn't even a 4-quarter game. So I don't know. All I can say is that was several weeks ago, and both teams are in a very different place right now. So we got a good look at both these teams last week. Chris, you obviously saw them up front, or saw them up close, very in person at JCSU. You talked a little about that defensive front. Do you think that defensive front can slow down California and what they like to do offensively?
Well, I just want to say that I both hope that they have such a great game, and I hope that they both tie. Like, oh man, it's painful to even cover this game, but that's all right. That's okay. Yes, I do think that the Frostburg front 4 can cause some fits for California, but I think that, to me, there are some concerns that I have with both of these teams, and why you can't really apply what happened the first game to this one too. For all California did to win against Virginia Union, they still gave VUU a lot of room to stay close in the game. I mean, even Curtis Allen had a 57-yard rush that allowed VU to get set up for their first touchdown, and at the first or second one. But Frostburg has 2 running backs that can get it done on the ground. KJ Smothers and Owen Doyle. And they both are, not that far off of 1,000 yards apiece. So there's that piece of it. On the flip side, for Frostburg, one of the things I didn't like about them is that they could have really run up the score on JCSU. And the reason why they didn't is because of what I thought would happen when I wrote about that game was that they would stall out in the red zone. And JCSU's defense was strong enough that it limited Frostburg's options in the red zone. And it got to a point where there wasn't a whole lot of faith in the kicker. So, you just kind of wondered like, oh, wow, this is getting really, really interesting. So, if it's a close game, you kind of wonder, does California have the upper hand there? Even though, Frostburg was the one who had 2 field goals made in the first go around. So to me, they both to me have pretty noticeable weaknesses. I think California feasts on turnovers as well to keep the field short. It's a rubber match. I didn't really feel like Assumption could get it done against Kutztown in a second opportunity, but I do feel like Frostburg's have come into this game with quite a bit of confidence as well on what they were able to do to create some longer drives, and I think that they're going to be very motivated for this game for a get back. So I'm going to go with the Bobcats.
Yeah, I agree with you that if you're Frostburg State coming into this, you have lots of reasons to think that you can compete and win this game because you could have done it the first time. You correct a couple mistakes and maybe if you have a few other healthy guys, you win this football game the first time around. So yeah, I agree with you. There's a lot of reason for them to come in here very, very confident, thinking that they can win this football game. I think the one thing that I really hang my hat on with this California team is, despite the fact that they do have 3 losses among their 9 wins, they're a team that has just been kind of finding ways. It's been a lot of different guys that have had to contribute to it. They've used 2 different quarterbacks throughout the season. They've had to go to a couple different running backs because, the guy that we expected to be their, number 1 kind of offensive player all year, Bobby Boyd, he got hurt early on, has not been able to come back. They've had a lot of guys who've really picked up and carried the mantle for them. So I really like that they have been able to find things from week to week that work in that particular matchup. Because it hasn't always just been, we have a running game that we can really rely on, or we have a quarterback running the ball that we can really hang our hat on. Each week, they're kind of finding something different that really suits the matchup for them, that makes them competitive. So I really like the way their coaching staff has been managing, particularly the second half of this season. I think it's been very impressive the way they've been able to find whatever advantages they can get and really exploit those. So I think that they're going to be able to do that one more time, but I am certainly not going to be surprised if Frostburg wins this game, particularly with that 1-2 punch that you talked about, Ferg. KJ Smothers, Owen Doyle, both were over 100 yards last week. I think Jordan Brooks is a solid quarterback who kind of minimizes mistakes and can really surprise you with his playmaking ability as well. So, and they're a good line of scrimmage team. So I think that's probably where we have to look at, first is the line of scrimmage matchup. And, Cary, I know that you're very much a line of scrimmage kind of guy. Do you think, and I know you're also the PSAC guy, so I know you're hoping that this will be a Cal versus Kutztown regional final. But when you look at that, Frostburg is a good line of scrimmage football team. Do you think that they can compete there and maybe get the win on the road?
Yeah, I definitely, it does. It all starts up front. I think really, kind of a key to the game is, with, what they've done, again, having the 2 running backs, combined with the 200 yards last week, are they going to be able to pound the ball on the ground? I think that's going to be a key component, to this. Again, Frostburg is one of those teams I've kind of had my eyes on from the beginning of the season. Of course, as we got to midseason, started looking who was potentially going to, make the bracket in Super Region 1, started watching, some of the other teams a little bit more. But, they've had three games, crossover games, from the MEC to the PSAC. They opened with Shepherd, who ended up being number 2 in the East behind Kutztown. They beat them, 41-27 early on. Then they beat Millersville, 2 teams from the East. And of course, then, the Cal game, which again, we've kind of talked through the talking points on that. But I think a lot of it will come down to up front. Khalid Taylor had a great game last week for Cal, 8 tackles, 1.5 tackles for loss. Are they going to be able to, do that with the running attack again? And then on the flip side of it too, if you get behind, I think it's well documented how lights out the pass defense is for Frostburg too. So it's really, who's going to be able to push who around, who's going to be able to, win the line of scrimmage, who's going to be able to rush the ball. It's going to come down to time of possession. I think this game probably more so than the other one we talked about are those wild card factors. Are there going to be, some things here, some miscues, maybe a team that kind of stops themselves, from time to time versus the other team stopping them. And, are there going to be, special teams, opportunities here, missed opportunities, and, ball control. So really, I mean, it's like, I think, you look at it, look at all the metrics all the way across the board. You talk about time of possession, you talk about, ball control and not turning the ball over, coupled with the line of scrimmage. I think those are kind of some of the things that we got to see what happens on Saturday. And I think one of the things was obviously Kutztown was the number 1 seed. It was a no-brainer. Like even when I started posting right away, it's like, okay, assumptions heading to KU. And, it was Frostburg and California PA are playing each other. So, but I think once we saw that it was, going to go to Cal, maybe say advantage for a home game for Cal, but we all know how this shakes out, with, most of D2, but the PSAC schools here, you're coming into Thanksgiving break, and there's a lot of the usual on-campus crowd's not going to be there. So I think any team would rather play at home, not have to get on the bus, not stay at a hotel, all of that type of stuff. But, I think that's a little bit of advantage too. And I'm going to go with the California PA Vulcans.
Yeah, I actually have always thought that playing on the road on Thanksgiving weekend, particularly if it's not a really long road trip, and this isn't, that playing on the road is actually not that much of a disadvantage because the vibe is usually just depends place to place. But I've been to a lot of post-Thanksgiving playoff games that are just kind of friends and family crowd. And then sometimes in those situations, it's actually an advantage to be the road team. So, and I won't be surprised if this is a totally different kind of football game than when they played before with all of the special teams, touchdowns, and all that. Wouldn't shock me if it's a totally different kind of game. So we got Chris going with the Bobcats, right? And Cary and I both going with California in this one. So those are the picks for this week's games. Before we bring this show to a close this week, we'll spend just a couple of minutes to talk about the Harlon Hill Award because just yesterday we saw the list of candidates for the Harlon Hill Award. And if you're new to Division II, the Harlon Hill Award is the Division II National Player of the Year. It is our equivalent of a Heisman Trophy. I always hate saying it's the D2 Heisman, but that is what resonates most with people. So that is our equivalent of a Heisman Trophy. Named for Harlon Hill, who was a standout player at what is now the University of North Alabama, which was a Division II institution for decades that had a lot of success. And of course, he was a professional with the Chicago Bears and had a great career in the NFL. So Harlon Hill Award candidates are nominated by the schools. Each school can nominate one player only. And then there is some vetting to produce a list of initial candidates. And those candidates are regionalized kind of in this first round of unveiling candidates. So in Super Region 1, we have 8 candidates. So we'll kind of take a look through the 8 players who are officially candidates for Harlon Hill, a trio of PSAC quarterbacks, a couple we've talked about already on this show, Matthew Reevy from IUP, of course, Judd Novak from Kutztown. We've talked about the seasons that they had. And in the middle, Jackson Ostrowski, actually a player who was also a Harlon Hill candidate a year ago from Lock Haven. Just led his Bald Eagles to their first winning season in 45 years and had another really good season individually along the way. So we got 3 quarterbacks there from the PSAC. Jay Castantine, the player from Assumption that we talked about a couple times as well. Of course, he's a big variable for this weekend. Had a great season for the Greyhounds. He is a candidate out of the Northeast 10. On the far right, Leonard Farrow, the running back from Fairmont State, finished in the top 5 in most of the career or most of the season-long rushing categories. Had a huge start to the season, and that really kind of propelled him into prominence, and he had a big season for the Falcons. And in the middle, a defensive player. How about that? Jamison Alston from Winston-Salem State. Happy to see a defender. Actually, I think it's the second year in a row that Winston-Salem nominated a defensive player. So always like to see that. And then our final two for Super Region 1, J.J. Jordan, the outstanding running back for Slippery Rock. Man, I saw him a couple of times this year, and he is an explosive football player. And on the left, Curtis Allen, the running back from Virginia Union. I have to think the odds-on favorite to win the trophy, leading the nation in almost every rushing category by a mile in most cases. Just a monster year that he has had. We'll talk a little bit more about this most likely on Sunday night and the next week's show. I think by the time we do this podcast next week, we should see the finalists. And of course, we expect to see Curtis on that list. Now, among these 8 players, 2 of them will advance as finalists on the national ballot. Now, guys, I'm going to go ahead and pencil Curtis Allen in as one of them, because if he's not, well, we're going to have to light fire to something. We're going to say he's one of the finalists. I want each of you to pick your other finalist from this region. Chris, I'll go to you first. Among the other 7 players, who is your second finalist?
Well, this is probably a great opportunity to bring up the fantasy element here, because you know, I happen to get a lot of luck, and one of the things I noticed was, like, this year, it just felt like it was a bit of a down year for quarterbacks, and it was a great year for running backs.
Yep.
To me, J.J. Jordan would be my other candidate for what he was able to do. You know, he had some really monster games this year. Even in Slippery Rock's losses, he was doing his part and then some. So I think he had I know he had a game with 200 yards rushing, but I felt like he had one with like almost 300 yards of total offense. And it was just incredible what he was able to do as well. So, you know, I think that, to me, there's maybe one other that really stands out, but I would go with him as my candidate and maybe leave him for Cary.
All right. So, Cary, I feel like I know which way you're going to go, but nonetheless, tell me, among the other 7 players there, who would be your second regional finalist?
So you had to let Chris go first. So again, you know, I mean, all the guys in the PSC, you know, Reeve coming in his first year did a lot of amazing things. Jackson Ostrowski, 2 years, maybe not quite the supporting cast that he had last year. Again, Judd Novak, incredible field general. But again, you know, when you're looking at stats and things of that nature, possibly works against him. So J.J. Jordan, it's not my first rodeo watching him. He's a local guy to me here. He played at Berks Catholic High School. I saw him play in high school. And so I'm going to, you know, invoke a little bit of Chris here, bringing up the P word with Portal. So he actually started out at Division III Wilkes and tore it up. You know, was at the Rock last year, doing some kickoff return, you know, return game stuff, getting a little bit of time, and then came on the scene this year and just blew it up at running back. So again, I think Chuck, you talked about a little bit too. Again, if you know, there's really a lot of time put in the study here of it. Again, all these quarterbacks in the PSAC, great job, but you know, the playmaking ability of J.J. Jordan and what he brings to a team. Especially, you know, the Rock early on, kind of going through, trying to figure out the quarterback situation and things like that. You working through some things. You know, J.J. Jordan really stepped up. I mean, he was, you know, again, you know, you know, what Judd does at Kutztown, great, but it's a great team effort too. J.J. Jordan really stepped up and really carried the rock, a lot, this season. So, I've been watching him do this for a long time. A huge JJ Jordan fan. He is a young buck, though. He has some more opportunities with this, but I would go with JJ as well.
All right. Well, I'm going to look at it this way. If all 7 of those players were in the transfer portal and I had a full scholarship in my back pocket to go get one of them to come to my team and help me get my team going, the guy I want is Judd Novak. Cary, I know you've talked about it many times. Because of the system they play and the system they run, he's not going to have enough of the gaudy stats to really get Harlon Hill recognition. Obviously, he's getting Harlon Hill recognition, but to win the award, it does take gaudy statistics, and he's just not going to have that. The advantage that I have and that you have that most of the voters don't have is that we've watched him play many times and followed his career. And it's not just the statistics that you can put measurables to. It's all the intangibles that he has as a leader and as a quarterback. I really like his style of play. I really like his style of leadership. I think in many ways it mimics his head coach. Very even kind of guy, doesn't get too high, doesn't get too low. It's always just on to the next play. Not a very demonstrative player. He lets his playing do the talk. Really like the way he plays. And also simply as a player, he's really good. He's really good. Cary, I know you've talked a couple times about his passing accuracy. He's number 2 in the nation in passing efficiency for a reason. Hasn't been intercepted all season. So he is the guy that I would go with. And that, again, said, I think everybody in this region and all the other regions is chasing Curtis Allen. Chris, you kind of alluded to it. There isn't a quarterback this year that really has the numbers that just really stand out, like a Zach Zabrowski or a Matoka, Tyson Bagent. There's some really good quarterbacks in the field, but there isn't a guy like that this year. The guy that has those kinds of numbers that stand above the rest is Curtis Allen. Anytime you get to 2,000 rushing yards in a season, 200 yards a game, 30 rushing touchdowns, that's really impressive. And there hasn't been a running back win this award since 2013. I really think it's time. And I think it should be him for sure. Chris, I've monologued too long about that. You've watched him all season long. What are your thoughts on it?
Well, I mean, when you look at what Curtis Allen's been able to do, he's 6'2", 215. Last year, when he backed up, the great Jada Byers, he was such a change of pace that he was getting like 7 or 8 yards, 9 yards to carry in the limited time that he played. And then as the feature back, I mean, not only is he getting that, but it's like the dude gets more than 20 yards to carry, 20 carries a game. I mean, he's got games where he has 30 carries in the game, which, a lot of times you see other teams that kind of, mix it up with 2 or more running backs just to kind of protect that depth. And I think with VU, they said, well, he's the guy, and he's head and shoulders about over the other folks on this team, and we're going to run with it. We're going to make it happen. It takes more than one guy to take this guy down. I mean, I think the obvious comparison is Derrick Henry for the way that he runs, and against Cal, right? 128 yards. It looks low, but that yardage was in 3 quarters. He really didn't do a whole lot in the first quarter, and so I mean, it's just incredible what he's sort of been able to do. Is the Harlon Hill all about statistics? No, I don't think so. I think that it's a thing that we watch these games, and we spotlight a lot of players that do extremely well, and Judd Novak is definitely one of those guys. And Ostrowski is another one that I've had the opportunity to kind of sort of track to get Lockhaven to that 6-5 record is pretty amazing. But you also have to think about the voters, and we're looking across the entire country, and that's what makes it a little bit tougher when you're trying to look at those, when you don't know about the intangibles, right? There's only a small collection of folks that are looking at games across the board, and Curtis Allen in the CIAA is not somebody that you're going to instantly look at Virginia Union for all the success that they've had, but he has made people actually, on top of what Jada Byers is able to do, people paid attention to Curtis Allen, and he did not disappoint at all. So to me, I think that's why he's the leading favorite here.
Yeah, it definitely helps that somebody asked about team success. It definitely helps. I mean, there have been some Harlan Hill winners that came from average to slightly above average teams. Zach Zabrowski repeated last year, and Central Missouri didn't make the playoffs. Now they were still a winning team and a good team. So yeah, I mean, team success is probably a small factor here. Name recognition, team recognition, that helps a lot. I think the fact that Virginia Union has been a playoff team the last couple of years helps Curtis Allen. The fact that Jada Byers was a bona fide contender for 2 years in a row, I think that helps Curtis Allen as well. But I think what helps him the most is 2,400 rushing yards. That's just hard to do in a 12 game season. It's really hard to do. And I know I brought this up. I agree with part of this. Yeah, it is largely about stats. I will fully acknowledge that. In a bad league where he plays the whole game, unlike KU players, don't necessarily agree with that part of it. But no matter how you shake this out, Curtis Allen to me is the runaway leader, and I think should win the award. So with that, I think we will call it a show, guys. We will be back next week for one final round in the regional bracket. After that, we're on to semis and the finals. So thanks everybody for watching. Enjoy your Thanksgiving. And for anybody who didn't get to watch, we'll have all these packaged up for you. So if you need a break from family tomorrow while you're enjoying your lunch and your dinner, we'll have all 4 podcasts packaged up for you to go check out if you need a little bit of escape from the family. So thanks for watching. Enjoy your holiday. Enjoy the games this weekend. Be sure to join us on Sunday night for Inside D2 Football, and we'll see you again next week.